Hey guys, Nick Reynolds here, back with part 5 of the Nuke Space Training Series. In this one, we're going to be going over how to do the screen at the end. We're going to be going over some finalizing colors, some little lens effects, and just try to wrap it up in this part 5. As you can see here, I have done a little bit of work on the screen and colors. I have not touched the matte since part 4, as I say you guys should keep going on the matte with the tricks learned from part 4. On this one, we're going to be going over just all the new finalizing tricks. So if you take a look at our part 5 Nuke script, I have, again, similar to what I did at part 4, is I made a green dot, and anything below this green dot is what is new. So I say let's just jump on in and start breaking down what I did. So the main part you probably notice here is the screen that we added here. As discussed in the last tutorial, is we will be going over how to do a 3D kind of projection style and unwrapping this and making it a little easier to do this awkward kind of angle and adding a screen and a roto. So let's start by getting this background here. Just a little side note here is this came in without an alpha. So if I turn that off here, it didn't have an alpha, and we're going to need this in future refs of this tutorial. So just like we did in the past, I just took an alpha here and I just made it 1. So just to give that background a full, because before we were getting no backgrounds. If we look at the alpha here, we are still getting just this. We want to fill that because we're going to be using that later. That's just a side note. So let's jump into the screen. So if we go to our merge right here, you can kind of see my breakdown I did here. And this is basically similar to the 3D roto stuff I believe we went over in either part 1 or part 2, as I duplicated my footage. So if we look at our 3D roto again to refresh our memories, we have our main footage, we have the tracked camera, and we have a point cloud generator here. So I could take that same point cloud and paste it in here. And let's take a look at what we have. So let's clear this out. We have our main footage and a projection. And I'll kind of just show you what we did is you can see this unwrapped here and it's kind of flat and it makes it a lot easier to kind of work on. You can see it's still distorting a little bit, but not too much. And the way we found this is we used the point cloud generator like in the past. If I hit F to full screen it, we could tell that our screen work is here. And I lined up a card, which is here, this purplish one here, which will be in the project downloaded link below. And I lined it up as good as I can by eye. So if I turn that off, you can kind of see where our screen is. And I brought that card in with the same projection. So again, if you need to refresh your memory on this, go, I believe, part 1 or 2, we went over the 3D roto technique. We're going to be doing that same thing here. So I can just refresh your memory. Let's go to the main footage. We have our camera projection and our main camera. It's the exact same one that is used here and in our 3D background work. So what we will do is take that card that we discussed with the point cloud generator here, and we're going to project it on here. And we will go down here and do our scan line. If we double click our scan line again, default it's on render camera. We want to bring it to UV. So this scan line, this should look a little familiar if I hit tab and go back to our 2D. This will start giving you a look. If I undo this and do render cam, if yours for some reason is not showing anything like this, it's probably on render cam. We need to get this to UV. So what we're basically doing is you're taking this card that we have, our camera projected card based on the points that we use here for reference, and you're projecting that onto the card, and then when we check projection mode to UV instead of the final render camera, it's basically unwrapping that and treating that card as a texture. You're taking your footage and putting that on as a texture. So after I had this, I pre-comped rendered it like I do with most of the things in this tutorial just to speed everything up. So we take a look at our footage here, kind of see what's going on. We're getting a movement, we're getting some parallaxing still, but it's not as much as the actual footage. It's kind of steady. So what we can do here is we could add, if we go to our merge here, so you can see, remember, we're on the scan line here. This is just a pre-comp. So this is the same thing. I can actually take this here and just plug that in here. Just speed it up. So if I look A, B, they're the exact same. So go in here and you can kind of see what I was doing here is this is purely right here is what we're working off of. But the final plug will not be this merge. This is kind of how you would treat a guide layer in After Effects, as I like to do my work here, but I don't want to rewrap the footage here. I just basically want to take our footage here, and we're going to do the exact same thing and put it back into space. So how did I do this? Let's break this down again because this can be a little confusing. We have our UV wrap here that we discussed earlier, and we're taking that same card. So if I take that card, I copy and paste it, delete that, it's the exact same thing. And I'm just taking a scanline render again, and this one is on render cam. Again, this was the same technique we use in the 3D Roto. I'm taking that object here, and instead of our work that we did here, I'm putting it purely just as it is alone, just to make it less footage. We don't want to bring this back on. We just want to bring our actual work. And we use the exact same camera. So this card are the same. The only difference here is this scan line is the UV one. This scan line is the render cam. So I'm going to try to break this down again. You have main footage. We're using the main footage. We're using the UV style here so we could see it. And then we are doing our work here. This is just a normal merge so I can see what's going on. See it's our same footage. We can plug that in here. And this helps us see our work in this kind of flat 2D world. And then I don't want to bring this footage. I don't want to bring this footage back in. There's just no point. Let's just take that same work we did here and bring it back into our final wrap here. And we could do whatever we want with it after that. We got it back into our normal world. You can kind of tell here and here. They're lining up. So now I'm going to go back in here and we can kind of see what did I do. So again, this merge doesn't matter. This is purely so we could just have something to work off of, kind of like a guide layer if you've ever used After Effects. And I could, turn this up and down just so I could see it. Again, this isn't the final comp here. This is just so we could see our work. So I had it around 50% opacity. And so I use this footage here that I got online. I'll put a link in below. And basically it was just pretty generic. I think you guys can go find a better one, to be honest. But I thought this one was free and I just found it on YouTube. Again, I'll put the link below. So let's bring this in and start this over. If you want to take this exact same one, you paste it in, comes in like this, and our project is 282 frames, but our footage here is 844. And looking at this original footage, most of the action kind of happens at the end. So we will take a time offset, and I have one right here. It's -400. So what's that doing? It's just literally taking it. If we go to the dope sheet here, you can kind of see, let's close these out, kind of see what's going on here. We have our original footage. We have our project is here, and our original footage is all the way over here. So all we're doing with the time offset was removing that footage. We're moving our footage to start earlier. So now if we look at it, we have more of this action stuff that wasn't there at the beginning. If I look at my original, it's still in this kind of boring stuff. I wanted that more action stuff. So now that we have this showing more of the action, let's come back and look at our work here. So I'll start over just to make this more clear. So let's take this and put this in. So I'll turn these off. We'll get back to these in a little bit. So right now, you bring it in, and it's using it as, we have this 4K format, and I believe this is 720. So it's using that 720 format. So first thing is we could throw a transform on here, and that should get you the correct edges. And we will start by kind of eyeballing it. Let's get it to a spot where it kind of settles down. So I'm on 218. Let's go to a flat number, 215. So I say we start by scaling this up like so. And next, let's put a corner pin on it. So we want to put a corner pin on before the transform. And the reason is it will align it correctly. So if you take a corner pin, let's just ignore that one for example. Let's ignore that for a second. And let's put a corner pin on after. what's going to happen is it's using the wrong format. So now we're kind of all over the place. And again, this is something that you could change with the from and the tos, but it's just more work. Let's put the corner pin on before. So again, we look at this one, we can kind of see what's going on. So I'm going to hit D to disable our merge. Remember, this is a merge we're using just to work off of, not our final. And let's get this kind of in the right place. So help us kind of, let's turn that back on. So we're kind of starting to be more in the correct spot. Next, we need to get that distortion right. So there's a few things. We have this curve here. We also have to do some roto here and here. But remember, we're on 215. This is a frame that we like. So throughout this, we start to see a distortion going on. And again, I'm going to speed this up by taking these onto our footage. Remember, these two are the same. Sorry. These two are the same. And if we look at our footage here, we see it kind of distorting a little bit. So remember, we probably don't have like the most absolute perfect camera track. We're just using the camera track to get us mostly there, and then we're going to finish it ourselves. So we have our work here. If we re-enable that, we said 215. So I have a few tricks of doing this. Some people might use corner pins. Some might use a grid warp. I like the Nuke spline warp. This happens to work really well for me. Hopefully it works well for you guys. So we got to start by getting this into our correct format. If we look at the transform right now, it's all over the place. So a common way to do this is you merge, put A, and put reformat as your B. Or your reformat should be your same format. We just have it default as our root format, which is the format of our footage that we've been working off of. And when you do this and look through it, it's looking as it does here. Basically, if I turn this, if I get rid of this real quick, and it looks fine here, but it doesn't here. This action here is happening on this final one. It's basically treating this reformat, it's taking this format, which is the same as here, which is why you might think, oh, it looks good here, but it's all weird here. This is just a kind of a precaution, and it helps you see your footage isolated in the correct format. So again, A is whatever you're working in. B, merges are always going to grab the format from the B, just future ref. So now we look at it, and you can kind of see these should be the exact same, at least format-wise. So now we got to kind of get this distorted right. So we'll be using a spline warp since we're in the correct format now. I'm going to add a spline warp here. First thing I want to do is I want to uncheck both of these. These are boundary box curve and a crop format. And that gives us kind of more freedom to do these distortions correctly. If you're doing more of a distortion, you probably want the boundary box curve on. But for this, it works better without it, in my opinion. So we don't even have to look at our merge here. We can just look at our actual footage here. And remember we said frame 215. So we want to start this on 215. Go to our spline warp. And let's get this curve here. So I'm using the Bezier tool here. And we're just going to make some points here. So again, 1, 2. And we'll fix these in a second. So I'm just aligning these, trying to get rid of this curve here. And this is basically, you could treat the spline warp can do a lot of power, and you can even just use the basics. Like we're using the basics here, and I kind of look at this as just like a more of a freedom corner pin. A corner pin, you only have 4 dots, and you can only distort them. Each distortion from each point is just going to be a straight line. But in the spline warp, we can kind of cheat it by using that idea of a corner pin, but we have more freedom as this can curve and whatnot. You get more of a heavy distortion. So we said 215s are a good frame, the one that we haven't touched. So now we have Bezier 1 here. I want to duplicate and join, and I want to lock this. Again, the spline warp is a pretty heavy node, and you could probably make a whole tutorial on the whole spline warp. But for this, we're just going over kind of the basics. So what's happening here is we have our first one and we have it duplicated in join. So it's basically saying, it's almost like if this is our reference and whatever we do here is going to get distorted. So that's why I lock this. We don't want to touch this. So 215s are a good frame. So anything that happens on Bezier 2 as it gets keyframed is going to be distorting it. So let's scroll back a little here, kind of see what I'm going for. Is if I take these on our 2, is that it should only select 2 because we locked 1. And I start to move these, we can kind of see what's going on here. So I'll go maybe to the end frame and here. And now we got to figure out, this gets a little tricky on this side because we're kind of playing a guessing game since we can't fully see the edge of this screen. So I see that this needs to move down. This probably needs to be moved up and back. Kind of see, whoops, global, see what's going on here. And as it drifts away, this is probably the lens distortion. And we're going to just keyframe this all the way until it's gone. That looks fine to me. And then again, we could tweak this a little as we actually watch it, because it might look good here. And I think what I was having my problem with earlier, was the bottom right kept drifting down, so I had to crank it up, which looked weird on this, but on the final it looked a lot better. And now this to me is starting to look like it's drifting a little too much down, so it might come in here. Again, you can kind of scrub it and you kind of just have to feel what's natural. So now that we have that, let's go into here and you have this air. And again, it's kind of like what we were doing earlier before we had the transforms here. Remember, if I turn all this off, we would get that we'd get the weird pixel grow issue. So the trick for this is why this is happening. Let's go to our merge before our spline warp. Our boundary box is inside here because Nuke tries to make it as small as possible to make render speeds quicker. It's computing that there's no need to render the information out here. But when we start distorting it, the problem is we are distorting it out of that boundary box. So a cheat for this is go to our merge here, and right before that I'm just going to hit crop. All I'm doing is crop. It should default, and now it's looking at everything here. Now you can kind of see what's going on is it's getting distorted. So if I turn that crop off, we have that issue because it's our work's over here, but the boundary box is over there. So turn that back on. It gives us enough space to work with. And if we look at our final here, you kind of see we're locking in. Again, I think this probably needs more work on the points, kind of like everything else in this series. I don't want to spend too much time on one thing. This one right here seems to be working pretty good. I spent a good amount of time on that one. So now the next thing is let's get the roto going. So I have a mask here, and what did I do? It's just a normal mask merge. And we could I'll take these are my better ones, but let's start fresh. So I have a roto in here, and we could either, if I look at my footage here, we could either come in here and do this roto, but we kind of did this already when we went in here. So why don't we take the one that we did our keyframes on, I'm just going to copy this and paste it in here. So let's go over it again. We have our rough adjustment with our corner pin transform, our time offset to get more of the action of the screen. We have the reformat so we could see it in the correct format. And then we have the crop and the spline warp to give it the distortion using this curve. And let's just steal that curve and put it into our roto paint here. So those should be the exact same. So now if I look in here and I turn my mask merge on, that gets us a decent head start. It got us the top, the bottom, and the left. Obviously, we still have stuff here. Again, like the last tutorials is basic, we're just using the stencil here. In this one, no special tricks, I just did a hand roto here. You could probably do better than me if you want to keep going on it. But again, we just rotoed out this and rotoed out this. So all it's doing with the stencil is we're telling it, if we look in here, we have a mask with the curve that we took from above. And then we have a stencil. We're telling it we do not want it to register on these areas. And what are those areas? This and this. So now we look at it. We can even turn the display off and look at the alpha. And we have it looking like that now. And again, don't worry about the transparency here. This is just so we could work off it. Again, you could probably get more accurate on these edges. We could do, let's say you wanted to, technically this shouldn't be cut off. We could do a spline morph before that with no animation and bend it. But I think once we put the parallax on, it's going to be very far out that you could pretty much not see it. That's one of the things you got to realize is that you get such a better eye when you unwrap it in this style that you could look at something like that and think, oh, this looks really bad because this is cut off. But when you bring it back to real life, it's very hard to see. So what else did I do is I didn't like that it was just a flat screen. I liked some of this reflection. So I wanted to bring this back. So what did I do is I took our footage here. All I did is I put a Luma key on and played around with these settings. Just took my A and the B and just put them around these points. And then I blurred it. And then again, I stenciled it. But this stencil is a lot weaker. This is 0.4. So let's look at it in our final here. And if I A-B it, oh my bad, I gotta put that down. So A-B it, you can start to see what it's doing. If I go back to our unwrapping here, and then, oh yeah, my bad. So I did a color here. So let's put this color on. And this is just, again, personal preference, just tweaking the blues and whatnot. And now I have this brought back into the correct space that we talked about earlier, how these two and these two correlate. You just have one doing a UV and one bringing the master back. One bringing the master back. So now, if I look at that and I look at that, it's starting to look good. And again, we do not want to use this. We don't. We can even view it here. It's the same style as this. These are just extra merges, just to view it so we can kind of see what's going on. But we want to get it by itself. So let's just keep going down this pipe. And I have two colors here. I'll turn those off for a second. So now you can kind of see what's going on. And I added these two colors. Now you could view it. And this, again, was a personal preference. Maybe you think that looks cooler. This, I think I was just going off more of trying to match this kind of stuff. I just took a grade and took my lift and my gain to these values. And then I came in here and just tweaked this more. So that pretty much does that for the screen. Again, I have more detailed work in here. Feel free to find a better screen. Like I said, I'll provide the YouTube link of this one I found, but you probably are better off finding one off Video Hive and whatnot. And what else did I do for finalizing this? So this is something I like to do just on darker shots, kind of like, let's just close this all out, is little tricks like this I personally think makes everything better. It's just less boring, less flat. I think when it comes to compositing, tricks to make stuff look realistic is just adding any kind of little something that's off with the camera, a little like inaccurate when it comes to something being brighter than something else. I think anything that stirs away from CG is getting it to look like real life. And what that basically is real life is not perfect on a camera. There's always going to be some kind of optics off or something not perfectly adjusted right in the exposure, some kind of lens distortion. And the more stuff you add like that, it typically makes a shot look more realistic, especially if you're using like CG elements. So little stuff like, I personally think this helps a lot, and it's just kind of like a glow style. So what would I do in something like this is we look at our master footage here after our screen. And all I took was I contrasted up just on the master, nothing special. I took a key and just a Luma key, tweaked these settings, pre-mults like we talked about in the last tutorial so you can see it. I took a transform, I just kind of stretched the footage. I blurred it drastically, it's 500, and put another color correct for more saturation, and I plussed it on. So I plussed it on in a very small amount, 0.1. Again, this isn't some special setup here. You don't want to copy these exact values. This is just something I did by eye. And I thought it helped fill this area a lot more. Again, if you don't like that style, feel free to tweak around with it more, or any other kind of finalizing tips that you think you have, throw them at it. I'm always open to it. So another thing I did was I took a convolve here with, this is basically, you can get really good lens blurs with this, or you can use the built-in defocus. And I took this kind of style here just for the edges, and I cranked it down a lot. So originally it looks like that with this. So I use this with a free plugin called Bokeh Builder, which I can link below. And the way this works is it's basically giving you a nice kind of defocus with whatever you plug into the filter. So how this works is, originally this is a pretty big size, 770, and the bigger the size is, the more it's going to calculate. So if I turn my reformat off, you can see we have this giant blur here. And all I did is I took this reformat and I changed it to scale. So originally it's on 2 format, which would probably make it more of a blur, because that's just taking a 4K image and using that as your filter. We just took it to scale, and you can see what happens. If I start to scale it up, you start to get more of a blur. You can do some cool effects with this, but I just took it discrete to 0.04, and you can see what it's doing. And I thought I would take that and just kind of lower it. Probably, I believe I had it around like 0.3 or so. And then I put a color correct on. This is more for a purplish, darker. And I knew I was going to put this only on the edges. Again, this is more discreet. This might be a little too much purple. Again, this kind of comes down to the finalizing of the pipeline. This is more of a personal preference. And I just took a roto here. I took this roto and just kind of did an offset vignette, just that, and I inverted it. You could invert it in the roto paint or just throw invert on, blur that. So basically all you're taking is, let's go back to our plus here, and our footage after this. I took the convolve, lowered it down, I made this pretty purple and darker, and then I merged it only on the edges. Again, it's pretty small, but I thought it helped blend the scene again. So just these two to add more life to it, I personally think helps. Again, personal preference here. Keep going with it, or maybe it's too much or whatnot. And then look through it again. Make sure you have a final crop, because if we look here, we have all this information that's getting rendered. And if you want to speed it up, you could do a crop, and then maybe a personal preference crop if you wanted to put bars on this. This looks kind of cool. And we're starting to get a cool style here. Again, maybe we'll put some grain on here. Again, on actual compositing, like for feature film, you don't just degrain the whole plate and just regrain randomly. I can make a whole tutorial on how to properly regrain and degrain only your work, regrain your work correctly, and leave the original footage intact. But again, this is more of just a personal shot just for getting the whole style. And this, we're probably just going to get away with generic grain. So I don't like to just fully throw the grain node on here. I will come in here. We could just take a preset to start with. Let's hit blue. So if I hit B for the blue channel, which is always going to be the most grain channel, you can see what's going on here. And I like this style. Let's crop that. I'll leave it for now. Like I said, I do a proper grain tutorial in the future reference. Again, personal project here. So come in here. I like to do it with a merge and then kind of just mix it in. So again, we're just looking in here. Full screen that. And then I like my crop. I would, future ref, I would render it fully so you have all your information and then crop it after. But again, this is just trying to get a look going. So I think that will conclude this tutorial series. I say keep going on the edges, keep going on tweaking anything to get it perfect in your eyes. And I think we came a long way. I mean, the original footage was pretty boring looking, had a lot of work to do. We had a lot of roto and keys to do, and the final piece is looking like a pretty cool shot. So hope you guys enjoyed this series. Any requests that you want for new tutorials below? I'm thinking start with the grain management, maybe more advanced keying, IBK keying. Feel free to comment below any questions and whatnot, and make sure to subscribe and have a good one.